Then she glanced toward the kitchen door to be sure it was closed, and without a second thought, she leaned over the plate and spat into the food. Not a lot, just enough to satisfy the bitterness burning inside her. She watched the saliva sink into the warm rice. She stirred it in gently, cleaned the edges of the plate and added the grilled chicken on top. The gate man opened the gate and Angela stepped into the compound, dragging her small bag behind her, her eyes scanning everything with quiet awe. It was a beautiful compound with a duplex, surrounded by low, well-kept hedges. She had been sent by Royal Touch Domestic Agency to work as a leave-in maid. The agency had told her Mr. Richard Beao, her supposed boss, was a blind widower, wealthy and quiet. The chief executive officer of Beao Technologies, a company known for developing innovative software solutions. The name had rung a bell immediately it was mentioned, but Angela couldn't quite place it. As she rang the doorbell, a woman in her 30s opened the door. She introduced herself as Dorcas, Mr. Beao's only daughter and child, who had been caring for him after the last help left. She had taken over from her father and became the CEO of the company after he became blind. "You're the one from the agency?" she asked, giving Angela a once-over. "Yes, Ma," Angela replied politely. The woman let her in. As they moved through the apartment, Dorcas spoke without looking back. "You'll be cleaning, cooking light meals and handling laundry. My father is quiet, doesn't like noise and doesn't talk much. Just do your work well and stay out of trouble." Angela nodded, absorbing everything. Then they stopped in front of a closed door. "He is in there. Go and greet him," Dorcas said, pointing towards the door. Angela took a breath, straightened her clothes, and gently knocked on the door twice. "Come in," a calm male voice responded. She opened the door slowly and stepped in. 60-year-old Mr. Beao sat on a chair beside the window, wearing a dark shade and holding a staff. Angela greeted him politely. "You must be Angela, the new maid," he said, his voice measured. "Yes, sir," she quickly replied. He nodded slowly. "Welcome, Angela. Do your job well and you'll have no problems." "Yes, sir," Angela replied, before stepping out of the room, suddenly feeling uneasy for reasons she couldn't explain. She had never met the man before, but something deep in her gut refused to settle. She settled quickly into the house like she had always belonged there. Her routines were smooth. Wake up before dawn, sweep and mop the entire ground floor, make breakfast, tidy the kitchen, dust the living room, and quietly check on her boss's needs before heading into the laundry. Mr. Beao rarely spoke, but Angela soon understood his rhythm. He woke up at 6 a.m., liked his tea lukewarm with 2 teaspoons of honey, and preferred boiled eggs to fried ones. He didn't like loud footsteps. At first, Angela thought it would be hard working for a blind man, but she soon found her job very easy. Mr. Beao was the most organized person she had ever worked for. He knew where everything was, and his ears were sharp like a hawk's eyes. By the end of the month, she received her first salary of 80,000 naira from the agency. Shortly after, she got another notification of 20,000 naira, paid directly from Mr. Beao. He praised her later that day and told her that he enjoyed her services, which was why he paid her extra. Angela couldn't stop smiling the rest of the day. She promised to do even better. The days that followed were filled with spotless rooms, perfectly cooked meals and well-folded laundry. Mr. Beao occasionally gave quiet compliments, and Angela began to take pride in hearing those rare, well-done comments. It motivated and kept her going. Everything was moving on smoothly until a quiet Wednesday afternoon. Mr. Beao had gone out with his personal assistant for a meeting. The house was empty, still and silent. Angela used the opportunity to do a deep cleaning of the upstairs rooms, including the master bedroom. She had just finished dusting the master bedroom table when she noticed a group picture frame on the table. She wiped it gently with a cloth and then paused. She brought the frame closer and looked again. There were 5 men in the picture, all dressed in suits. One of them was clearly Mr. Beao, younger, clean-shaven and smiling. But it wasn't him that made her stomach drop. It was the man standing beside him. Angela recognized that man. It was her father. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked back at the photo, now studying all the faces, as if the truth would disappear if she blinked. She quickly finished up with the cleaning and returned to her room. She sat on the edge of her bed, her knees weak, her chest tight, as she remembered the first time she heard the name Richard Beao from her father. Then she burst into tears. Angela changed completely after that day. She woke up the next morning with a new kind of energy pulsing through her veins. Not fear, not nervousness, but something darker, something quiet and cold. She went about her duties that morning with the same precision as always. Mr. Beao remained his usual self, calm, distant, and polite. That afternoon, she was in the kitchen preparing his lunch, jollof rice with grilled chicken and steamed vegetables. The aroma filled the house, just the way her boss liked it. When the food was ready, she dished out a portion into his serving plate. She arranged it neatly, just like she always did. Then she glanced toward the kitchen door to be sure it was closed, and without a second thought, she leaned over the plate and spat into the food. Not a lot, just enough to satisfy the bitterness burning inside her. She watched the saliva sink into the warm rice. She stirred it in gently, cleaned the edges of the plate and added the grilled chicken on top. She took a deep breath, picked up the tray and carried it to the dining room, where Mr. Beao was already waiting, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. "Your lunch, sir," she said, setting the tray in front of him. "Thank you, Angela," he replied, picked up the fork and began to eat, chewing slowly, his expression thoughtful. "This is very good," he said after the second bite. Angela smiled. "I'm glad you like it, sir." When Mr. Beao was done eating, he pushed the plate slightly forward and wiped his mouth with the napkin. "You have a good hand," he said. "It's hard to find staff who are this consistent. I appreciate it." "Thank you, sir," Angela said again, forcing her voice to stay even. Later that night, she stood by her window, staring into the quiet compound. She thought of her parents again, her father's tired eyes, her mother's quiet sobs, the empty chairs that had never been filled again. The birthdays she spent alone, the nights she had gone to bed hungry. Then she thought of the man sitting comfortably in the living room, sipping juice, probably reading through voice messages from business partners. "He doesn't deserve this peace," she muttered to herself. After that day, Angela continued to spit into her boss's food every day before serving him, and he ate innocently, unaware of what was going on. This went on for weeks. Somehow, it made her feel better, thinking she was avenging her parents' death. One day, she decided to take it a step further, the fire of revenge burning in her. She wanted to prepare his usual cup of coffee. She filled the kettle and turned it on, then stepped to the sink. She fetched a bowl of water from the sink and washed her dirty hands inside it. When she was done, she poured some of the dirty water directly into the clean mug meant for Mr. Beao's coffee. Then she poured the hot coffee into the mug, gave it a gentle swirl, after which she placed it neatly on the breakfast tray, with the toast and eggs she had prepared earlier. "Good morning, sir," she said as she entered the dining area. "Ah, Angela, right on time as usual. Smells good," Mr. Beao replied with a small smile. "Thank you, sir. It's toast and eggs." "And your coffee, just the way you like it," Angela said with a smile. She placed the tray in front of him and stood back, watching as he sipped the coffee. Perfect," he murmured. Angela turned away and walked calmly back to the kitchen, but her eyes flashed with quiet satisfaction. By afternoon, things began to change. Mr. Beao called out weakly from his room around 2 p.m, asking for warm water and painkillers. His daughter, Dorcas, who had visited that afternoon, responded first. Angela stood outside the door, pretending to dust the hallway as she listened. "My stomach," Mr. Beao groaned in pain. "I don't know, it started after breakfast," he added. Angela peeked through the slightly open door. He was pale and sweating. She didn't expect it to hit him this hard, but she felt no guilt, just a dull ache of satisfaction. Dorcas helped him lie down, placed a cold towel on his forehead, and called the driver to get the car ready. Within an hour, Mr. Beao was rushed to the hospital and he was eventually admitted and placed on intravenous fluids. The doctor said it was a mild case of food poisoning. That night, when Dorcas returned to the house to get some clothes for her father, she called Angela into the kitchen. "What happened and how did you prepare his breakfast today?" she asked, eyes narrowed. "Did you wash everything well? No expired milk or anything?" "No milk, Ma. He takes his coffee black," Angela said smoothly. Dorcas nodded slowly, her eyes still fixed on Angela's face. "That's strange. He doesn't fall sick like that, never," she said, now looking confused. There was a long silence between them, then Dorcas said, "Be careful, Angela. My father is not just any man. He has people watching over him. Don't do anything that will bring you trouble." "Yes, Ma," Angela replied quietly. She left the kitchen, her face calm, but her heart was racing. Still, she didn't regret what she did. She sat on her bed that night and thought of her parents again. "You lost your lives because of that man, and now he can't even keep down a cup of coffee." She closed her eyes and smiled to herself. Mr. Beao was discharged 2 days later and he returned home from the hospital, looking weak but stable. He rested all day, barely speaking a word to anyone. Dorcas stayed close to him, fussing like a protective mother hen. It was weekend, so she stayed in the house for 2 days after his return. In the afternoon of the third day, which was a Sunday, she drove out and pretended to have left the house. She parked her car somewhere in town and quietly returned to the house around the time Angela usually made dinner. Then she hid outside by the kitchen window and watched Angela preparing dinner. After the hospital scare, something in her gut hadn't felt right, so she decided to keep an eye on Angela. The menu was grilled chicken, yam porridge, and a small plate of pepper sauce. Angela took her time to prepare it, not out of love, but out of cold precision. Her movements were sharp, calculated. She placed the last slice of chicken on the tray and reached for the small bowl of pepper sauce. And then, without hesitation, she leaned forward and spat into the yam porridge like she used to. Dorcas was shocked to the bone at what she saw. Angela stood upright again, adjusting the plate and wiping the tray edges with a clean cloth. She was about to carry it out when Dorcas stormed into the kitchen. "So, this is what you've been doing," she roared in anger. The voice snapped through the air like thunder. Angela froze. "Ma?" she stammered, eyes wide. Dorcas's face tightened with fury and disbelief. "You've been spitting into my father's food? Why?" she asked with a loud, angry voice. I can explain." "Explain what?" Mama Dorcas barked, eyes blazing. "You think we wouldn't suspect? I saw you, Angela, with my own 2 eyes. You put your mouth in his food and spat into it." Angela stepped back, heart racing, eyes darting around the kitchen like a trapped rat. "It's not what you think, Mum," she tried to defend herself. "Oh, it's exactly what I think," Dorcas snapped. She pulled out her phone. "And now I'm calling the police." "Please, Ma," Angela whispered, her voice suddenly soft. "Please don't. I didn't mean—" "Shut up," Dorcas roared. "A blind man? You're doing this to a blind man? What kind of wickedness is this?" Within minutes, the compound came alive with chaos. The gateman was summoned. Dorcas called Mr. Beao's assistant and explained what had happened. The assistant didn't waste time. He arrived with 2 officers from the nearby police post, and before Angela could fully process it, cold handcuffs were being snapped around her wrists. Wait, please," she cried. "Let me talk to him, let me explain." But no one was listening. "Take her to the station," the officer said. As she was dragged across the compound, Angela saw Mr. Beao standing at the doorway, his hand resting on the wall for support. Though he couldn't see her, she could see him, looking confused and hurt. Angela wanted to scream. She wanted to run but couldn't, and for the first time since entering that house, Angela felt afraid. Very, very afraid. At the police station the next day, Dorcas wrote down her statement, after which Angela was taken to the interrogation room. 2 officers sat with her and began to ask her questions. "Why did you do it?" one of them asked. Angela blinked slowly. "Because he killed my father," she whispered. The officers exchanged a look. "How did he do that?" they both asked in unison. Angela burst into tears as she began to speak. It was a rainy Friday afternoon. I had just turned 18. I received my letter of admission into the university that morning and was waiting for my father, Mr. James Okoro, to return home so I could share the good news with him. We lived in Ibadan, while he worked here in Lagos and only visited and spent the weekend with us in Ibadan. My father returned home that afternoon in that heavy downpour, and my mum and I were surprised. We were expecting him to return at night. He slumped into the armchair and stared at the wall. "James, what happened? Why are you home this early and in this heavy downpour?" my mother asked curiously. And then, with a voice so hollow it didn't sound like him, he said, "They fired me. They said I stole money, that I falsified the financial records, but I didn't do it. Someone framed me up. I tried to explain, but they wouldn't listen. The CEO, Mr. Richard Beao, whom I have worked with for years, didn't even let me explain. No hearing, no appeal, no severance, just disgrace. He told me that I was lucky he would not be pressing charges. As we speak, I won't be getting any salary this month, and all my accumulated benefits accruing into millions of naira will not be paid," he explained helplessly. The weeks that followed were the hardest. My father completely lost his peace and became terribly ill. He couldn't even go out to look for another job. So, we survived on the little income from my mother's petty business and the little savings left in my father's account. Things became so difficult for us, and my father cried like a baby every day. His sickness became worse, but we didn't have money to take him to the hospital. Family members were not willing to help either. At exactly 6 months after he lost his job, he collapsed in the bathroom and eventually passed on. The shock was too much for my mother. She became sick afterwards. She went to bed one night 4 months after my father's demise. She didn't wake up the next day. The doctor said it was due to high blood pressure. And just like that, at 18, I was alone. Thankfully, the house was built by my father, so I stayed there rent-free. But a house meant nothing when my belly was empty. I lost my admission as there was no money to pay the fees. I learned to survive. I did so many menial jobs, like washing people's cars, cleaning and running errands just so I could feed myself. I even hawked sachet water on weekends, yet there were days I went to bed hungry. That was my routine till I turned 23. Then one day, on my way to a small cleaning gig, I passed by an agency office, Royal Touch Domestic Services. I went in to see if I could get a job. I got to know that they train and send girls to people's homes to work as maids. I applied and underwent the training. It was that agency that sent me from Abadan to come work at Mr. Beao's house. I didn't know who he was until I saw a picture portrait of him and my father. Then I remembered how he unjustly fired my father, which eventually led to his demise. I saw him as the cause of my predicament. If he had given my father a fair hearing, maybe my parents wouldn't have died and I wouldn't have suffered so much. I was only trying to avenge my father's pain and tragic demise. I never planned to hurt him. I acted out of pain, out of anger, out of years of silent suffering. Angela ended her confession. There was a long, heavy pause in the room, after which the officers stepped out quietly. Mr. Beao was invited to the police station immediately, and he was led by his personal assistant and Dorcas to the police station. Angela's confession, which was recorded, was played for him. After he finished listening to it, he asked to see her, and he was led into the questioning room, where Angela sat in tears. He sat down, cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice soft. "I heard what you said. About your father. I remember James Okoro. He was one of the finest accounts officers we had. Quiet and reliable. I trusted him so much. So when the accusation came, I was so disappointed that I didn't listen to him. I reacted too quickly. I was under pressure. The system flagged him. Internal reports said it was him. I believed them. It was the love I had for him that made me not to press charges against him, so I fired him and held back all his accumulated benefits and the salary for that month. But 2 years after he left, we found out who was behind it all. It was one of the senior staff, the man who reviewed the reports. He had been siphoning money and using other staff accounts to hide it. Your father was one of them. We caught him and he confessed. As we speak, he is still serving his 15 years jail term. I was furious and ashamed of myself. I wanted to apologize and pay your father all his allowances and, if possible, bring him back to work with us. I sent some workers to the address he filled when we employed him, but they were told that he built his house and moved out. His lines were not going through either. It was around that period that I had a fatal accident which affected my optic nerve. I lost my sight and everything changed. Because of my blindness, I had to step down and I made my only child and daughter the CEO. I had been home ever since. I never found your father. I didn't know he had a daughter. I didn't know he had died. He ended his speech, sounding very emotional now. Angela sat motionless, her hands trembling. The hate in her chest slowly turned into confusion, pain, and guilt. She had lived her years blaming him for everything. Now, hearing the truth felt like pouring salt on an open wound. She didn't know whether to scream or cry. When Mr. Beao returned home that day, he was quiet all through. Dorcas, his daughter, walked up to him in his study, where he was. "Dad, you see why I suggested we installed cameras in this house? But you said, no need, the house is peaceful, I trust the system. Now see what that trust has done. If we had installed just one camera in that kitchen, we could have stopped this earlier. Saved you from getting sick?" Mr. Beao sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I didn't think it was necessary, I am sorry." "I've already spoken to a technician," Dorcas informed him. "They're coming tomorrow. I'm not waiting for your permission this time. Cameras in the kitchen, hallway, main entrances, in your room. You may not see, but at least now someone else will." So, the next day, CCTV cameras were installed in the house. Angela was charged to court and sentenced to 6 months imprisonment. She served her 6 months jail term, and on the day she was to be released, Mr. Beao asked that she be brought to the house. So, his driver and personal assistant picked her up and drove her to the house. Angela was scared. She thought he was going to punish her again. When they arrived at the familiar duplex, Angela's heart began to pound as she wondered what would happen next. She was led inside, and there he was, sitting in his usual chair by the window. Though he couldn't see her enter, he turned his head in her direction, as if he had been waiting for the exact moment. "Angela?" he said softly. Good afternoon, sir," she replied, her voice barely audible. "Please, sit," he urged her, and she obeyed, sinking into the chair across from him. There was a long silence between them. "I heard you completed your sentence quietly," Mr. Beao began. "I asked to see you today because there's something I need to do." He gestured to the small table beside him. His assistant stepped forward, picked up the small envelope on the table and placed it in Angela's hands. "In that envelope," Mr. Beao said, "is a cheque for your father's accumulated benefits, his unpaid salary, severance package and pension, all recalculated with interest. The total is 7,650,000 naira. I want you to take that money and start over. Not with guilt, not with shame, but with purpose. You're still young, Angela. You still have time to rewrite your story." Angela covered her mouth with both hands and began to weep, deep, choking sobs that came from the very pit of her soul. "I'm sorry," she cried. "Sir, I'm so sorry." "I forgave you long ago," he said gently. "But now I need you to forgive yourself. And promise me, from this day forward, to be a good girl. Let go of the bitterness. Choose peace." Angela dropped to her knees before him, holding the envelope tightly to her chest. Thank you. "I don't deserve it, but thank you," she wept. "I will never forget this, I swear. I will never forget this." Mr. Beao reached out slowly, found her shoulder and gave it a light squeeze. "Go and live, Angela. Not in the shadow of what happened, but in the light of what's possible." She nodded through her tears, still kneeling. And when she finally stood to leave, her eyes were swollen, her face wet, but her heart was lighter than it had ever been. As she walked out of the house, she knew the past could never be erased, but the future, it had just opened its doors. Thank you so much for watching this story to the very end. Sometimes, the people we think are our enemies may be carrying their own burdens. And sometimes, all it takes is one act of mercy to break years of bitterness. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, because I've got another one coming that will shake you to your core. Stay kind and stay strong. Bye for now.